Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first podcast on Couch FC. And today we're going to be talking about a subject that's pretty relevant today, which is racism in football. And we think it's an important subject to bring up, especially in the global climate that is today's world. So I'll be joined by Idris, present yourself, Lucas,
Hi.
and our special guest today, Raphael. So I'm gonna start out by just going through what were some important cases of racism in football this year, and we'll be able to talk about them in first place. So I'm gonna start by England. There's been many cases. The first one that comes to mind for me was the England game in
Yeah.
Montenegro, where a
Wait,
couple English players, Sterling included, were victims of racist chants in the European qualifying game.
wasn't it Bulgaria?
No, it was Montenegro. Montenegro.
Both, I think.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, maybe both.
Yeah, maybe both.
Um, Antoine Rudiger, a Chelsea player, was a victim of
Yeah.
also racial chants from Tottenham supporters. It was the police investigated, but didn't come to a conclusive decision, and Rudiger, uh, of course, was pretty annoyed with it, and it was completely dismissed. Multiple players received abuse online, notably Pogba. Again, Danny Rose also was one of many players who was really abused online pretty heavily. Danny Rose even said in an interview that he can't wait for his career to be over because of all the abuse he's getting on social media and sometimes on the pitch. Then we're going to move on to France, where the problem in football is maybe less prevalent, but there are still cases. Last year in a Ligue 1 game, Dijon versus Amiens, the game had to be stopped for several minutes because of Dijon supporters, again, racially abusing an Amiens player. Spain has also had cases this year in an Atletico Bilbao against Espanyol Barcelona game. Iñaki Williams was victim of abuse again from the stands. And then we have a special case, which is Italy, where the problem is very, very prevalent, where we've had two cases in Cagliari, where both Lukaku and Moise Kean have been victims of abuse from fans. We even have one of Moise Kean's teammates, Bonucci, saying that Moise Kean should actually take 50-50 of the blame from the abuse. So really pretty horrible statements from even a teammate. So Italian football really has a deep racism problem that's even integrated in the whole institutions. A newspaper in Italy put on their front page to present a game. They called it Black Friday game, with two black players put in front, and also the Italian league to have a sensibilization. They decided it would be a good idea to put monkeys uh, as the poster to stop racism. So Italy really has a deep institutionalized problem with racism that can't be treated lightly. So we'll start off by asking this question, where right now fans are being suspended for, in Italy, we have cases of 5 years or even a lifetime in England from stadiums. But these suspensions have been going on for a while now, and racism still hasn't gone out of the game. So we're going to ask if the FAs should enforce stricter rules, and if yes, what? So go ahead if someone wants to take the.
Um, I have some thoughts on this. Well, racism has been like, as you said, in most of the countries, but the problem is it's banning the fans. Obviously, will prevent them from going to the stadiums, but eventually it would not rule out because there will still be racism outside of the stadiums. I think that's what Patrice Evra said following the Luis Suarez incident, is that it's a problem about education, and that yes, banning them is kind of like a short-term answer, but the real solution would be to educate the fans. For example, give them obligatory community service in more poor or other cultural like communities in their city, to show them that those players and those communities are the same as us, as them. We're all human beings. We're just unfortunately less privileged in those areas, and just to show them that just to show them that we all start just with different advantages, but in the end we're all human beings. And I think this education aspect is really important, because that's how we move forward and seclude racism from the sport as a whole.
Yeah, I guess the FAs aren't really resolving the problem. They're just pushing it away without just saying it's none of our business now. So it's not really a positive way of looking at it.
I think one thing that we did see in the international games, well, for example, the England-Montenegro, I believe they had to stop the game several times, and eventually they did clear the fans from the stadium.
Yeah.
Now, that's what they did in Montenegro, but that's not what they're doing in Italy. And they're enforcing, with international games, they're forcing these countries to play games behind closed doors. Fans cannot attend because of the racism that's going on. And yet you don't really see any measures like that in Italy, when, yes, it might not be as extreme as in Montenegro, but there is still a problem, and there's no place for any of it, no matter how minor some people might call it. I think there should be, for clubs that have racism problems like that, especially the Italian ones that spring to mind, you need to be having games played behind closed doors. You need supporters to be identified, install cameras, something like that. You need supporters to be identified and then banned, and you need them to be prosecuted afterwards. The whole process needs to be done through, and I think also there is an educational aspect, like Idris said. It's obviously good to deal with the root of the problem rather than just punishing those who do it. So there's an educational aspect. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't enforce these bans. And one thing that supporters do care about, if they're real supporters, they care about their club. And if you start enforcing, I don't know, firstly financial penalties, fines, that kind of thing, that's going to decrease the club's potential spending on other things. So that's going to impact the fans if they're true fans. Other things like point penalties. There are loads of measures that aren't being used that could help to dissuade fans from doing these kind of things. But then there's also the possibility that some of these fans don't really care about that. Yeah.
Raphael, if you have any thoughts?
Well, I don't have much to say. They said everything, because personally, I think that it all comes down to education and ignorance, because people are not educated enough. They don't know what the problem really is. They're just like, they assume things, and I think that's the most problem. I think at the root of the problem is education. If we get the supporter educated, they will understand that what they're doing is simply wrong. And as we go forward, I think the problem will start to disappear.
And also, I wanted to add something. So I was watching the Luis Suarez Patrice Evra incident, and so Luis Suarez eventually got banned. But the thing is, he still denies it, saying there was no proof, there was no audio, you couldn't really see clearly on the cameras. So I think a new question to ask ourselves is, yes, we have to punish, maybe even zero tolerance policy, but the fact is, not only fans aren't the only ones who do racist abuse. Sometimes it's from even other players, because there was this famous example in Turkey, I think, if I remember correctly. And so the problem is, how do you catch the on-pitch abuse? And I think that's when there was this new system of when where the referee had the mic. They implemented it in like an Australian match, I remember, and I think that could be one of the answers of the problems to stop maybe on pitch racist abuse, just by having a referee with a mic to then have proof and then have a confirmation of these abuses and then lead to maybe like further punishment and even bans.
I definitely think other supporters have to be accountable for the attitude of supporters who are giving this racial abuse. I mean, it shouldn't be normal that fans that can hear this as much as the players don't do anything as well, and they're not there talking to the other supporters, telling them to just shut up and stop abusing the opposing players. So I think, for me, other supporters also have to be educated about how it makes the players feel and how it impacts them and the game that is football that we all love. So I think the other supporters, if you're in a stadium, you hear racist chants, you have to do something about it. You can't just say, "Oh, the referee has to stop the game." So
and
yeah,
that's why you see these. I mean, I don't know much about other clubs, but you see these systems being rolled out where fans are actively encouraged. They're given a short 5-digit number to text if they see or hear anything that shouldn't be going on in the stadium, and then you can get stewards to come and deal with it. So it is a thing that if you hear something that shouldn't be going on in the football stadium, you do have to report it. You have a certain responsibility to report it, and it's good that clubs are trying to make that easier. With regards to on-the-pitch racism, another example that springs to mind is in the Championship this season. Kiko Kazia, the Leeds goalkeeper, racially abused a Charlton defender. And the FA has actually dealt with it relatively well, in my opinion, because they have actually enforced a ban. It took a while, but he has now been banned for 8 matches. And he's also been fined. I mean, Kazia denied it throughout the whole thing, but there's some video footage, and it looks like he did do it.
And of course,
it's a shame.
You have some refereeing experience, Lucas. So I was wondering if maybe you've not seen any incidents, but what referees can do also to sort of calm what happens in these sort of situations.
So I luckily haven't experienced any direct racism. I've experienced a few other issues that can't be tolerated, but if I hear something like that, I've heard sexism in the game, and what I did is I cleared the crowd. Okay. There's no place for that. If I heard racism in a match, I'm glad I didn't. That would be the game over for me. Okay. That's the case because I've got several friends who refereed, and one of them did hear racist abuse, and there's no place for that. He sent off the player and abandoned the match, and that's another thing that can be used. That's another. I was saying about things that can be used to punish clubs and punish fans. Abandoning matches is maybe even forfeiting some matches in special cases. But that's definitely something that isn't used very often, but could be.
Yes.
And I also think clubs themselves have a part to play in the players' behavior and the fines and the bans, because most of the time we see like a player going on racist abuses and then being fined or banned by the football association, but you don't really see the clubs banning them. You always see the clubs kind of showing their support. I'm going back to the Luis Suarez example again, but after Luis Suarez was banned, there was Liverpool. You know, they all had how do you say stand with Luis Suarez. You know, even though he was rightfully convicted of a racist abuse, and I think the second part behind the ban is the club to then also educate their players and tell them straightforward, you shouldn't have done that. This will cost you, I don't know, a place in the team, and not just show their support. Even though it is their players, the clubs also have a part to play in educating the players further.
Well, an example about that, actually, a club taking responsibility. I don't know if any of you heard, but a LA Galaxy player.
Yeah, I heard that.
I heard that too.
it wasn't directly him. So there's a little bit of controversy there because he essentially had his contract terminated because of what his wife said. Well, his wife posted a series of stories on Instagram mocking the Black Lives Matter movement and the George Floyd death, which is obviously unacceptable and disgusting. And rightly so, the player issued a statement saying that he's going to try and deal with the problems in his family and that he doesn't accept it in any way. But LA Galaxy also decided there's no place for people with that sort of mindset in the club. And I think it's a good approach by them to show zero tolerance. Yeah. But that illustrates actually there was a lot of looking into why his wife had those opinions, and I know that, like you said, Montenegro is racism in those countries, in those Eastern European countries, and I think that again, like you said, isn't something that needs to be dealt with. You need to start educating people that those aren't acceptable points of view.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've established that the education problem that is really prevalent in every case of racism, really, whether it be in sport or socially. So now on another question where we're going to really focus on the problem in Italy, because Italy seems to be, at least in Europe, one of the countries where the problem, nearly every month we seem to hear a new headline of a black player in Italy being racially abused, maybe by the fans or the media. So we're going to ask what can we do to sort of get racism out of the Italian game and protect black players in Italy to not have that risk of being racially abused whilst playing football. So I personally feel Italy has a more it nearly feels like a cultural racism, if you can call it that, where the whole, I mean, I don't want to generalize too much, but the whole country seems to be rooted against and sort of normalize all this hate towards black people, where it nearly, like the newspaper, I forgot the name, but when the newspaper uses without even thinking twice the Black Friday headline, I mean, it doesn't seem to shock anyone in the whole newspaper industry. So I think it even goes. It's not even education anymore. It's changing a whole country's perspective on life. Nearly.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a bit extreme, but
I agree, because I think in some cases of racist abuse in stadiums in England or France, for example, it's only a very small minority of racist abusers. There's only one, maybe more people, but I feel like in Italy, there's this whole racism outside of the state that kind of plays into what happens on the football pitch. And I think that's the real root of the problem. It's not just the fans that you have to educate. I think it's just everyone around it, and just as you said, I don't want to generalize it, but I feel like the problem comes from outside, and that's what is brought onto the pitch.
Yeah, like the Italian FA doesn't seem. I mean, they gave a 5-year ban to the Cagliari fan who was giving monkey chants to Lukaku. I mean, 5 years is it's ridiculous, honestly. The Premier League give lifetime bans, and there you see the Italian FA getting nothing. So I don't even think they're responsible enough to actually protect their own players, even the heads of the FA. So it's pretty nonsensical. It doesn't even seem. It seems like someone else out of the country needs to come into Italy and say no. Like a higher power, and talking about UEFA or even FIFA needs to step in.
Also, I mean, like you said, it's because of cultural racism which makes its way onto the football pitch, and one of the causes for that, in my opinion, is lack of diversity. I know that is relevant in England because you do see a lot more racism and a lot more unacceptable opinions in, for example, small towns in the north that don't have a lot of diversity, and you have societies that are much more separated. Whereas I think, for example, in London, it's obviously there are still incidents, but it's more of a mixed bunch in London. There's a lot of tolerance in London of other people. And I think that's an attitude that needs to be more widespread and generalized to other cities around the world and in the same countries.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the problem is the fact that it's a really homogeneous country. There aren't many culture there. So yeah, I think if they start to realize that there are more and more people of color coming to the country, playing in different teams, they might, I don't know, accept it maybe, realize that they are not going to be only Italians or Europeans, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was touching upon a bigger question after saying what UEFA or even FIFA really do, because right now what they've done is just have the whole no racism campaign, or on every match now there's a little sticker that says no racism.
Yeah.
They've had superstars do adverts saying say no to racism, and I think it's good. Of course, they're condoning every. I mean, yeah, they're critiquing every racist act that's going on. But for me, for the face of football, whether it be Europe with UEFA or FIFA in the world, it doesn't seem enough. Uh, I mean, they're not saying they're leaving the FAs give out the sanctions when, for me at least, they should give a rule saying, all right, this goes for FIFA should say, in every football league in the world, if there's racist abuse anywhere, the fan should be excluded for life. You have a ban of whatever. Maybe legally that can't work because of, I don't know, countries having different FAs, etc. But it just seems necessary at this point that the big governing bodies like UEFA and FIFA do something else than just marketing campaigns of saying no to racism.
Yeah, I agree on that one. Big organizations, the parent organizations, so FIFA and UEFA, are taking some steps, but those steps aren't enough. And you can see that because of the fact that things are still racist incidents are still happening in games around the world. I think I don't know if any of you have heard about this, but UEFA has a racism awareness day in every season of the Champions League and Europa League on match day 3. They were planning on doing that in the European Championships. Obviously, that's been postponed for a year. But I think it'd be interesting to see if they can maybe find some sort of system to make sure that doesn't become an issue during the international competitions. And I think in international competitions, maybe those matches are more prone to racist abuse. Again, because of the different cultures and not being, I mean, it tends to be the generalization. It tends to be the countries in Eastern Europe that usually don't make it through to the main competitions anyway. I think those kind of things and Italian clubs are the main issue. But it'd be interesting to see some more. It's good that UEFA and FIFA are making steps to address the problem, but we need some more severe penalties, more clear guidance for clubs and countries.
Yeah, I think I agree with what both of you guys said, that the bigger governing bodies have to set up a guidelines on what punishment should apply when racist abuse is heard. And I think having the same so punishment and the same guidelines for all the different football associations, football federations, I think is what brings us closer together, but at the same time, it's what unifies us to get all the different federations and all the different clubs. It unifies them all against racism. And I think that's very important because you can't, a single club cannot tackle racism by itself. It's supposed to happen through the whole federation. And so I think that's why the guidelines thing, as you guys mentioned, with the same guidelines for every racist abuse in every country, I think that is a good idea, and that is something they should look to implement in the future.
Yeah, I think there's another part of racism in football that maybe isn't as obvious, but also for supporters, where you've had incidents where certain supporters have been racially abused by other supporters. Whether it be, I remember an incident, it was a PSG Chelsea game in Paris where a black man was trying to get onto the tube, and Chelsea players were not allowing him on and pushing him off. And there's been, I know a YouTuber I follow called Toby, maybe some of you know him, said he was talking about him going to a game in Napoli, where people in the street were telling him, "Oh, be careful in the streets." Some people, he would get just walking down the street, he'd get people giving him monkey chants. So I think racism in football is also supporters on supporters and not just supporters on players.
They've got a very bad example of that, actually. Well, of disgusting example of that, which happened. I can't remember exactly which game. I think it was Fulham against Middlesbrough away, and a right back who's black and Irish, called Cyrus Christie, wasn't playing great, but his sister was in the crowd, and a Fulham fan decided to abuse his sister racially, and he also got pushed. And that's something Fulham opened an internal investigation. Nothing actually happened with it. But I've seen with that player in particular, I've seen some of the comments on his Instagram posts, which are disgusting, from Irish people who don't accept him into their team because he's black, from fans who, even after the incident, who claimed that he was lying about it. I don't see any reason why he would do that. And it's just sad to see attitudes like that in football, really.
Yeah. Well, I think this goes back to other supporters being. I think even supporters, and that goes for Raphael, Lucas, and you, Idris. We can all do something when we go to a football game. Be sure to actually care about the people around us. That be it the away fans or other people around you. You don't want to stay silent in what could maybe become a toxic environment.
I remember there was when I was playing football in America, there was a game where I wouldn't say racially abused, but it was a racist comment. It was about my language, my ethnicity, and where I came from, my origins. And I remember I stood up to the guy and I was like, "Referee, did you hear this?" And he was like, "No, I'm sorry." So I started to get angry, which obviously I shouldn't have. And then so my teammates had heard it. My teammates told me, "Yeah, don't worry, Idris, it's not worth it. It's not worth going towards him and stuff." And at the time I was like, "Okay, you guys are right. Maybe it was just a comment. I'll just let it slide." But now coming back to think of it, maybe I wished as if those teammates would have, since they heard, maybe would have told the referee, "Oh yeah, this happened," instead of keeping a silent ear, and also telling me to maybe stay silent, which at the time sounded like a good idea. But maybe now, because we must bring change, I think if you hear something like this, maybe you have to tell the referee. You don't have to let it slide. You have to tell the referee and pressure him into actually changing the game and talking to that player, telling him what was wrong and why he shouldn't do that, and once again educating him.
But even if the referee, I mean, to be honest, while it would be great if referees could hear everything, there might not be that much the referee can do if he hasn't heard it. But I feel like there are other approaches that can be taken, such as, I mean, a player plays for a club, you can put in some sort of, I mean, you can put in the police report for that kind of thing. You can put in the report to the league, and you can hopefully see the club and the player penalised for it, especially if you have multiple testimonies. That it's difficult to enforce as a referee because, I mean, if you hear it, obviously that's going to be a red card, that'll be that. But I don't believe that you can, unfortunately, if you haven't heard it yourself, or if you haven't heard it, if one of your assistant referees hasn't heard it, there's not a huge amount you can do straight away on the pitch. But that doesn't mean there aren't a lot of things that can be done afterwards. So I know that the league I refereed on had a very good system of dealing with abuse. I didn't have any racist abuse, but I did have a few instances of just general abuse, which I could report, but also the players could report. And so even if it can't be dealt with on the pitch, it can still be penalised afterwards. That's not saying that it shouldn't be dealt with on the pitch. Wherever possible, it should be. And I know for a fact, and I'm sure you do too, because you're also now captain of a team if next season gets played. I know that if I heard that from many of my players, they'd be off. And again, a mentality thing. You need zero tolerance from it, whether it be from your own players or from the other team or from the coach on the sidelines. If you hear that, whoever said it is done.
And yeah, this problem comes, I mean, I had the example of Bonucci, one of Moise Kean's teammates. After him getting racially abused, he said Moise Kean should take 50-50 of the blame. I mean, I think stuff like that, I mean, at the time, I remember being completely shocked by a teammate saying something like that. Seems like he's nearly not backing his teammate. And
I mean, anyone saying that, really, that's a ridiculous argument. That's like the argument you hear from some people who say that people who get raped are asking for it. Like, it's just it's a ridiculous argument to even entertain. And the fact that it comes from a teammate makes it so much worse.
And no punishment, I mean, not that I know of, ensued. So, I mean, maybe he should apologize with an Instagram story, but I mean, at this point, it doesn't.
I mean, I think that's the kind of you see a lot of inconsistencies between clubs. So LA Galaxy, the player's wife posted racist comments like that, and the player contract was terminated. I think, to be honest, his contract should have been terminated, Italian, because I mean, not only if he said that about anyone, to be honest, that's unacceptable. But the fact that he said it to his teammate as well just demonstrates a lack of community in the squad, really.
Right.
The club should have said that.
Well, Raphael, I want to ask you, well, as you've had football, you've played football and rugby, I know, in the US. So I was wondering if you could maybe talk about your experience being black, of course, and playing in these sports. If anything has ever come across and how you've dealt with it, maybe what's happened.
Well, personally, I've never had really any experience with racism in sports, but I remember like I think it was 11th grade during a rugby match. At the end of the game, we won. It was against like another American high school. And for your information, we used to play with like another school, the Japanese school. And so we won the game. And at the end, the Americans were like shouting racial slur to the Japanese. I won't say the slur, but because we won, they were like upset and they started blaming it on us, and especially on the on my Japanese teammate. And one thing I liked at the time was that the coach told us like, stay calm. I'm gonna talk to the referee and we're gonna sort these things out. Mm-hmm. And he went to talk to the referee, and I don't know the end of the story, but I remember something like the other team had a penalty and they couldn't play like 2 or 3 games or something like that. And that was something I liked at the moment because it's not something that you really see often, So yeah, I think that was
Um,
one way that really happened to me.
but going back to your story, Raphael, I think that showed really good composure from your coach and also from the players who reported it to the coach. Because so for one of my soccer teams, which were mainly Latinos and African Americans or South Americans, I remember we used to play in mainly white dominated tournaments and football teams, and most of our players would get racially abused on the pitch. And I didn't know that during the game. I mean, I didn't hear them, but most of our players tried to take the matters in their own hand and
Yeah,
starting up a fight instead of going to our coach, who would then go to the referee and get maybe that team or that specific player excluded. And I think taking the matter into your own hand and showing signs of violence is never a good answer, because it would only incite them to just maybe insult you back, or just it would not educate them, or it would not tell them why what they did was wrong. And so I think just maybe not staying silent but going straight to the referee and having the backing of your coach, I think, and taking maybe legal action with the football association or with the opponent's teams. I think that's what will make a change, because that will punish the whole team as a whole, and that's, I think, it will take out the bigger problem and the big problem in a much larger scale than a single player who will get like maybe beaten up or something.
yeah. And the thing is, like, they didn't like they did it on purpose, because at the end of the game they were like laughing at us, even though they lost, and they started like saying these racial slurs, and the players were like, all right, if you don't say something, we're gonna beat the shit out of them. And we were like, okay, calm down. Let's talk to the coaches, and we'll talk to the referee. And we're like, okay, we know they're doing it on purpose. Let's not get into the game. Let's calm down and then tell to the referee and the coach.
And also, I don't know if you guys remember it, but we played against another French school, which I am not going to name. But so we played against another French school in America with our French high school, and their coach at the time was black, and we could clearly hear their players shouting out racial slurs at their own coach. And at the time, I was really appalled at first of all, the lack of disrespect, but also how could you say these to your coach? And I think that relates back to the Bonucci incident, maybe not in the same scale, but I think when it comes to these attacks and these racial abuses, we must show solidarity and all try and stay opposed and all try and tackle the problem together.
Yeah, agreed.
I think that's the most important thing. Yeah, if there's no like solidarity between the teammates, like we won't get to the end of the problem.
I think that's definitely one of the main points anyone should take away from the discussion we're having right now. And of course, we encourage everyone to have this discussion, whether it be in your family or with your group of friends, because it's important to talk about it and to see what you can help, whether it be in any situation. Here we're talking about football and sports, but racism happens everywhere. I mean, the whole George Floyd incident is proof of that. And I think, engaging in protests, peaceful protests, like in the US, or talking about it with your friends, seeing what you can do. There'll be a link to donate to the George Floyd Fund under this video as well. So I think, what you must do, especially being white, is support, no matter how. Talk about it, donate, go to a protest. You can't stress it enough. Really, don't keep silent. Show that racism concerns you, because racism should concern you. And if it doesn't, then you should look at yourself and tell yourself and really think about the person you are. It may seem harsh, but you have to be harsh with yourself if you don't think racism is a problem, and if you don't think it's And if you don't think your time is valuable enough to donate or even think about it for at least a minute, then you should definitely think about yourself and who you are, really. So yeah, if anyone has something, any ending conclusions to add, otherwise, yeah, we'll wrap it up. So thank you for following this first episode of the Couch FC podcast. Wasn't a very happy topic, but feel like a topic that needed to be addressed, and we'll hope that won't be needed to be addressed anymore. So there'll be a link again to donate to the Black Lives Matter cause under the video, and yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and bye.